Hi, I am Opal. I work for the Nixon Library in Jacksonville, and we're part of the Central Arkansas Library System. And this is a program that I've been doing on the first Friday of every month, and it's called First Friday Crafts. And I usually just go over some basics of some kind of craft. I actually have had a person do one on needle felting before for me. It was Miss Megan. And we've also covered applique and drop spindle and a few other things. And today I'm going to show you how to do just some basic things with applique. So I'll show you real quick an example of it real quick here. Alright, let me turn this down. This is a tea towel that I was working on that has just some of the very basics of what you would do with applique. You pick a design that get the template and pick out a design that you want to do, and you cut it out. And there is this paper that you can buy that's for applique that is sticky, that you can iron onto your fabric, and then it has a part that peels off that allows you to lay the other side of the fabric onto something and iron it to it so it will stick in place for you and stay in place. You want something like this because when you're stitching around the edges, it'll shift on you if you don't use this applique stuff for it. And also another thing that you need with applique is a stabilizer to go on the back side. There's different types of stabilizer. This one is a tearaway one. It doesn't stick to it. I'll just pin it to the back of the fabric before I start doing the stitching, and it just helps for whenever you're doing this stitching around the edges. I'll show this a little bit closer. It helps the fabric from puckering and moving around on you. It really does help a lot. So I recommend using some stabilizers. There's different kinds, but I'm just using the tearaway kind. And yeah, of course you need some kind of template. I just found some templates online for what I'm going to be doing today. This is a little more work involved when you do several different pieces. Today I'm only going to show you how to do just one piece. But the fun part of applique is that you can do take a template and cut different colors of fabric out. You can even do solids and prints together. Those are usually pretty cute too. And you'll stitch around each individual piece. This is a little more complicated because you have to figure out which part you're going to stitch first so you can cover up the stitching. With this one, I ironed all the pieces in place, and then I stitched around the bottom first because it had a start and stop point on it, and then this one here goes all the way around. So I started here because I knew it would get covered up when I did this little piece. I started here and went all the way around it until I stopped here, and then when I did this piece I started at the top here, went across, and then I covered up these stitches when I went over here, and then covered them up on this side too. So this way you cover up a lot of the edges if you plan out how you're going to do your stitches, if you're going to do multiple pieces of fabric like this. To keep it simple for today, I'm going to do another leaf on here. This is like a long tea towel that I'm doing. And for the other leaf, I'm going to use a different coordinating. I'm sticking with the same colors that I did with the acorn, so it will all kind of go together. And I'm going to use this fabric, and here's my template for the other leaf that I'm going to be doing. I decided to do a slightly different one. There's lots of free templates online, and this is the applique stuff that we're going to have to iron on to the wrong side of your fabric, and you have to look at it to see which side is the proper side. It's going to be like this is kind of more smooth on this side, and it's completely smooth. This side has some texture to it, so that's how you know this is the sticky side. So I'm going to put it down on my fabric here. I'm going to cut it down a little bit because I don't want it going off the edge, because it is sticky, and if I ironed this to my ironing board, it would stick to my ironing board, and I don't want that. So I'm going to kind of cut it down a little bit to make sure that's not going to go off the side of my fabric. I may even have to cut some off here too to make sure it fits right in the middle here. And I'm just going to iron that down, and I want to make sure that it's the same size as my template, a little bit bigger than my template actually. And oh, I did not plug in my iron. And with this type of this right here, the directions say not to use moisture whenever you're ironing it to this. So I'm going to do it with no water in my iron because we don't want any steam. So be sure to read the directions on whatever you get, because there's a lot of different kinds out there, especially with the stabilizer we're going to be using on the other side to hold it, and you know, to keep our stitches from getting bumpy and out of shape for us. Let's see, I wonder if I cut that down good enough that it's not going to go off. But it is sticky on the other side, so you have to be careful to make sure it's not bigger than your fabric. And with this one, the directions say to press it for about 5 to 8 minutes. If your iron is nice and hot, then that'll be about the right time. You don't want to do it too long. Okay, my iron seems nice and warm, so I'm going to just press this in place. Okay, I did that a little longer than 8 seconds. And you just want to make sure, see, that little edge is peeling up, but this is going to be down here, so I'm not going to be using that edge. So I just want to make sure that where the template is going to go, nope, see, that edge is not down either. So I'm going to do that again, just to make sure. You do not want it coming up off of there. You want it to be stuck, because what you're going to be doing is peeling that off of the fabric, and you want to make sure that the sticky part stays on the fabric when you're peeling it off. I'm having to let it cool off because it's really hot right now. But this piece is going to peel off of my fabric, and once I peel it off, that's when I'll stick it to the fabric I'm going to be sewing it to. But I'm waiting for it to cool because I'm going to use this pin to mark my design on here. But I want to make sure that the edges, yeah, okay, it did a lot better job this time. So I'm going to draw my design on here. I used a water-soluble pen on my first design, and it was really hard to see the water-soluble pen on here. It just didn't draw really well on it. So since you're going to be cutting these marks off, I'm going to be cutting like just within the markings, so the markings doesn't show. You just want something that you can see really well whenever you're cutting it. Yeah, like I said, the water-soluble pen just did not do a good job of marking it for me. And try not to shift this around too much. So any pen, I would test the pen on here first to see if it would wipe off easily. You don't want a pen that whenever you mark it on here, it's just going to smear and come off when you're trying to cut it out. So just kind of test one to see what does a better job on this. It's shifted a little bit, but that's okay. Alright, so now I've got my design on there, and we're just going to cut around the design. And like I said, I'm going to go right within the area where you can't see the ink markings that I did, because I don't want the ink, it's not water soluble ink, so I don't want it coming off on my fabric, the one that I'm going to be ironing it to. Okay. Some of the hardest part of doing the appliques is getting your machine set to stitch it. And also, if you don't use a stabilizer, it makes it really hard to get an even stitch on there too. And applique, it's just kind of something you have to practice with sewing to make it look nice. I noticed the more I stitched, the easier it got for me. Let's see, I want a more rounded edge there. Okay, so there's my design. And now we got to find an edge to peel it up off of there. And sometimes that's can be difficult, because your fabric may want to come apart on you if you didn't get it your iron nice and hot whenever you were sticking it to it. This one's coming off a lot better. Some of the ones that I did before, I didn't get it hot enough, and the sticky part was trying to come loose with this piece right here. Okay, so I'm done with that, and I think I'm done with my scissors right now too. Alright, and that stabilizer, I'm not going to be using it just yet. I'll be pinning it to my fabric here in a minute, but right now I'm just going to figure out where I want to lay this design on here, where I want to stitch it down. So I want to space it out about the same amount of spacing that I did here and here, so it has a more even look to it. And then I got this one a little closer to the edge, so I think I'm going to do a similar thing with this one to and now I'm just going to add some heat to the top of this to stick it to my fabric. Hopefully I didn't check my iron to see. It had kind of cooled off, so it might take a minute for it to heat up again. But you want to make sure that it's sticking nicely and not, the edges are not trying to come up on you when you're sewing around it, because that will cause a problem. The fabric will pucker on you, and it won't lay flat. So you want to check it. I can feel that trying to roll upwards for me whenever I touch that, so I think I'm going to have to apply a little more heat to make sure it's stuck on there really good. This is meant for just really keeping your fabric in place while you're sewing around it. Okay. I think that's going to stick pretty good. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and unplug my iron while I'm at it, because I won't be needing that anymore. Okay, so now we've got our stabilizer, and I need some pins, because we're going to pin this stabilizer to the back of the fabric. So I got to open this up, because this is a tea towel that I have folded up. Okay, and so this stabilizer, it doesn't have a wrong side or a right side on it. I'm just going to put it facing this direction because it's tending to curl this way. So I'm going to put it under it this way. And what you want to do is to make sure that this one's kind of see-through, this fabric is, so I can kind of see where I'm positioning it behind my fabric, and I think you can kind of see too. You want to make sure it's completely behind it, and I think I'm going to turn it where the corners are sticking out because I cut this kind of small. You want to make sure it's completely behind your design and not too close to the edges. Let's see here. Alright, that looks, well, this one side, it would probably be easier if I flipped it over to make sure. That one corner does not, oh, my doggy is coughing. I'm doing this at home, so let's see. Actually, I think I am going to flip it over briefly to see if I can do a better job of positioning it. Oh no, I can't really see it too much. So, alright, well, let's just do that again then. I might have done a better job. Okay. Alright, so once you get it flat behind there, then you're going to pin it in place. And this would work better if I had this on a stable surface. So I think I'm going to move over to my table. That way I can lay this flat on my table and make sure that this stabilizer is nice and flat. So I'm going to move this over to where I'm going to be sewing. I'll lay that down so I'll be able to show you how to do that over there now that I kind of got that where I want it. Alrighty, so now I'll just have to lower this so you guys can see what I'm doing. Maybe a little bit lower. Alright. So I'm making sure my stabilizer's under there. Still, I can feel it. And it's kind of, I think it shifted on me. So I'm going to try to move it just a little bit. It's not as visible over here as it was over there. Okay, there it is, and there it is. Okay. So I don't want to get too close to my design so I don't have to take my pins out while I'm sewing. But you just want to pin it. I think I'm having a lot of problems with this. Yeah, it's shifted on me again. I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to pin this in first. Which I think I probably made my stabilizer a little too small. Because I am going to have to move these pins whenever I'm doing this. Okay. And it's to the edge there. Okay. The main thing is you want to make sure that it is flat. Okay. Because you don't want that puckering either. You can feel it under there. And I just pinned myself just a little bit. I think I'll be okay. I think I cut my stabilizer a little. You want it to be a little bit bigger so you can make sure that it's completely under your fabric. Sorry, my puppy dog is in the floor trying to make her bed, so she's kind of making grunting noises. Sorry if y'all can hear that. Okay, so I've got it pinned in place. And another thing that is helpful whenever you're doing applique is to have a sewing foot that is open. I'm going to show you the one that I have on my machine. There's different ones that you can have for applique. I've got a whole bunch of different sewing feet for my machine, but a different one that I'm not using today is called an open toe foot. It's all metal, let's see, I'll show you that one. The one I'm using is plastic. The main thing is if you're using an open-toed one, flip it over and make sure that there's an indentation like that on the back side of the machine, because as you're stitching, the stitching is going to be up, it's kind of bumpy, and this allows it to go over the area you're stitching smoothly without your fabric getting hung up and not wanting to move forward. So as long as you've got an open-toed one that's got an indentation like that in it, that will work just fine for applique. The one that I have that's plastic, I think it's actually called an embroidery, open-toe embroidery foot. So that one works too. So, and then I think I have another one called a large opening pressure foot. Like I said, it's as long as it's got that underneath it where it's got the gap where it allows your fabric to move with that really thick stitching on it, then that will work for what you're doing. And I would recommend in the beginning, if you want to, you're going to have to practice with setting your settings on your machine to get it to stitch the way you want it to. The directions I was following from somebody that I found online that gave tips for machine applique, they said to switch your needle on your machine to, and they had different sizes. I'm going to show you real quick. These are the different sizes that they said to install on your machine. You want a nice sharp needle, and these are just the different ones that they recommended. I believe this is the one that I installed on my machine. So any of these would work for what you're doing. Now she's saying to wind the bobbin with 80 weight embroidery thread or bobbin filled thread. I'm using, let's see, what am I using? It's like just 100%. Well, mine's just all-purpose. Just sewing thread that's for your machine. You just want a good quality that will work. If you get the thicker kind like that's embroidery thread, it's gonna look a little bit nicer like whenever it's thicker, and you can do this zigzag stitch and it's really cute and pretty. You can still do that with just regular thread, like I'm going to be using, but the stitch that I'm doing is not going to be open like that where you can see that it's a zigzag, but it is a zigzag setting. And she also recommended to set your machine, you have to set it for the zigzag stitch. And the width that was recommended was a 1 to a 1.5 millimeter, or about 1/8 of an inch setting. And let's see, what did I do on mine? I guess mine is a little bit different. I would start off with the way that she says to do it because it's more of a zigzag stitch. The way I did mine is you can't tell it's a zigzag stitch anymore. It's, I guess, more of what you would, it's more solid looking. Like whenever you're doing like if you're doing a buttonhole on something, this is more like the stitching you would do on a buttonhole that's closer together. And then she said to set your length just above and not at the satin stitch setting, with, or between 0.5 and 1 millimeter. I did mine a little bit differently. I'll show you real quick. The length of my stitch on mine is, don't look at the number down here. This number right here is actually my setting. The 3 is the setting for my zigzag stitch. So that's what the 3 is for on mine. Now, not everyone's machine is going to be like mine. Mine's a very basic machine. And then up here is the length. F, if it was all the way on F, it would not move at all. when I'm stitching, but it's really, really close to the F. It's between the 1 and the F. That's why my stitches are going to be so close together, is because it's almost not moving. It's barely moving forward when it stitches. So that's with the length of mine it's going to be. Now up here, that's my setting for my width. I went with a 3 because I wanted it a little bit wider. The stitching she set was quite a bit smaller, but it's a cute way to do it if you're starting out to practice, and that's the way I did mine on another project, and it was a nice way to kind of get used to doing applique to start out. So I would recommend doing that in the beginning. If you want to try the method that I'm doing today later, then I would. Here's some examples of some of the stitching, and you want to practice this on your machine to see what it's going to look like. There's no stabilizer behind this, so my stitches are kind of irregular and not straight. But you can see by playing with your machine to see how it does the different stitches. This is where I finally decided I wanted one of my stitches to look. I wanted them closer together like this. And so playing with your machine helps you learn how to set it to do the different stitches. And this is more of just an open zigzag stitch. This is like a zigzag stitch really, really close together. You can tell I got slightly closer, and then the last one is really close. And then her settings are going to be small like this. These little stitches like this. And this is a nice cute one to practice with. So I would recommend trying that out first. And I would also recommend, instead of stitching on fabric where the design is showing, flip it over to the wrong side. You can see the stitches better, and maybe a lighter color or even a solid would be better. I just grabbed this because it was handy. But it's a great way to practice before you get started. You want to get your settings set the way you want them before you start actually sewing on the applique, because then you could ruin your whole applique. And then this was whenever I practiced my turns, because in order to keep it from being gapped on the corners, there's a certain place that you stop your needle on the fabric on your turns. So practice that too before you get started. I'm going to go ahead and show you how to do this. And I've got my other open toe sewing foot on here. I'm going to show you really quick. This one also has a place behind it that's open. It's got a bigger opening on it than that metal one did. I don't know how much you can see, but you can kind of see there's an indentation. So when it's going over the fabric, the stitches is going under this and not getting hung up by hitting this part right here. If the stitches are too high, it's going to hit this foot and not go forward. So you really do need an actual sewing foot that's meant for the project that you're working on. And I also changed out my thread to be like a coordinating thread that I would like to go on here. Alright, so I'm going to start. I'm trying to think if I need to start on. Usually a corner is good to start on. I guess the top corner will be okay. Alright, and you have to also think about getting it lined up where your stitches are going to hit. You want it to hit you want it inside, but then just on the outside of where the fabric is. So you need to find out where this is going to hit, which this is going to hit on the inside, but I need to know where it's going to hit on the outside to make sure. I'm going to play with my machine real quick here. I'm going to let it go down once. I want it to hit on this other side here. So it's coming to my right side here. And I wanted to know where it was going to hit on my fabric to make sure that it's just on the edge of my design. So I'm going to lower that down so I know exactly where it's going to hit before I put this down, so I can see. See, I want to get it as close as possible just on the outer edges of it. but I also need to turn it slightly to get it lined up where it's going to hit on the other side. Okay, so that gives me a good idea. I'm going to move in a little bit closer for you guys so you can see. That's the thing about applique. You have to really play with it a lot to make sure it's going to work the way you want it to. Because with the zigzag, it's going, you know, going left and right and left and right. And also, whenever you're stitching, let's see, I'm going to go ahead and stitch in there so you can see it's hitting just on the outside of that fabric. And I'm going to go ahead and let it hit here. Oop, and see it's not quite, I need to shift just a little bit. I need it to actually hit my fabric, and it was going to hit on the outer edges of it. Alright, so this is a kind of a really tight spot, so I'm going to get it started just a little bit by manually doing it. And some of this you're going to have to go very slow. And watch where it's hitting. And also when you're turning your fabric, depending on how, oops, didn't mean to hit that. Depending on what you're doing, like this curve right here is a curve going this direction. So when you're curving this way, when you're getting ready to shift your fabric, because this is not a straight edge, this is an inward curve. You can't tell because it's very slight. On inward curves, before you move your fabric, you want your needle to stop on the inside of your design. So think of that. Anytime you've got a curve that's inward, or if you have, say there's a point that maybe there's a cut in the fabric where it's pointed inwards, you always want your needle to stop on the inside. Now if you're doing the outside curves, you want your needle to stop on the outside of the fabric before you shift it and move it. Because when you're moving it, like if you stop your machine and you're raising your pressure foot, you want to make sure the needle's in the fabric whenever you do that, because otherwise the whole thing will move around. So when you're doing that, the outer curves, you need the needle to be on the outside, and the inner curves, like this one, you want the needle to be on the inside whenever you're moving it. So I just wanted to let y'all know that before we got started. It gives a better look, a more even look to it. And you're noticing this design's getting up there with that. So I'm going to have it stop on the inside. And I'm going to very slightly shift it so it's more lined up. And I think I might move this needle because this is going to get kind of in the way. And so now I'm getting close to the edge where I'm going to be shifting it where it's an outside curve. So I'm leaving my needle on the outside when I moved it. Okay, and I'm going to put it on the outside again because I need to do some more shifting. This way you don't end up with gaps in your stitching when you're doing this close type of stitching. And this is an outside curve, so I'm also stopping on the outside. And it's still an outside curve, so I'm going to turn it again while it's on the outside. And I can tell that fabric did not get sewn down really good. It's kind of puckering. So I didn't double check that to make sure it was stuck really good to my fabric. It's a little too late now to do anything about it, but okay, and I stopped on the outside again. Okay, so I'm gonna have to do that one more stitch so I can turn it on the outside. I'm gonna move that needle out of the way. And this one is going to probably hit it. Let's see. Okay, definitely want to stop it there. Alright, I'm going to move my papers over there. And this does take a lot of practice, so definitely don't get upset the first time you do it and it doesn't turn out the way you want it to. Just keep practicing, because the more you do it, the more you get comfortable with it too. Okay, so you notice this turn that I'm getting to in the middle is it's a turn it's a very so slight, but it's inside. So I'm going to stop my needle on the inside when I turn this time. But I still have to line it up with my foot. And I'm going to be doing some more turning, so I'm going to stop on the outside because this is an outside curve. I think I'm going to move that needle out of the way too. And I'm getting to another turn that I'm going to have to turn on. So make sure it's on the outside. And the more confident you get about it, you'll be able to move your fabric as it's sewing more instead of having to stop sewing. Let's see, I want to make sure that's on the outside because that's still an outside curve. And this is a nice simple design to start with. I would definitely get one that didn't have lots of turns and curves in it the first time you do it, just so you can get comfortable with it before trying something more difficult. I got a little too much on the outside there. You want to stay closer to your fabric than I did. Okay, and this is still an outside curve, so I'm going to turn. And I'm going to have to move that to get it out of the way because we're coming back around this way. Okay, got to stop on the outside. Don't want to turn it too much because this is more of a straight edge on this side. And as I get closer, I'm going to be turning towards the outside, so I need to make sure that my needle's going to be, this is an inside curve, so I have to stop my needle on the inside. Let's see. Let's see, I need to shift it some more. Except I've kind of come off my design more here. I'm thinking my needle that I have in here is in the way, so I'm going to move it out of the way. Hope y'all can see this. Okay, and I'm getting to the end here. I want to make sure that I'm going to get just to the end to cover up my other stitches. Alright, so that just covers it. So I'm going to do some back stitching to hold this in place. And then I'll come forward, come forward again. Alright. Alright, that should be good. Alright, so I'm going to take this out. And I'm going to show you how to cut the stabilizer out. So over here, I'm going to get the last of my needles out and cut my threads loose. And you notice when I began, I didn't do any back stitching at the very beginning. I knew I would be going over that part again, so that was going to reinforce it for me. So that kind of shows you I didn't do a really great job with that, but it turned out okay. And like I said, you just have to take some practice at it. And for the stabilizer, it's handy to have one of these to help you cut some of it loose if it's difficult. You want to be, it should peel up for you if your stitching is really good, because this is tearaway kind. Let's see, let me find a good, if you get it started, it does really well. Yeah, this edge is got more thread that's thicker, and so that tends to tear away from those areas easier. So I usually start in those spots. And then see, there's, let's see, and you don't want to pull forcefully, just kind of, you want it where it'll tear like it's where it's perforated. You don't want to pull up in your stitching. And also, once you wash this, the little bits of pieces that are still left behind that are sticking up, it's going to get soft and dissolve away and come away in your wash. Alright, so there's that part. The interior part sometimes is a little bit more difficult to get a hold of. You don't want to cut your stitching, but this helps get underneath it. And if you have an edge that doesn't want to come up, you can kind of cut it a little bit with that. But if you have some really pointy scissors that have a nice sharp point to it, they work well too with getting up and underneath this. You just want to tear away as much as possible. I'm putting my thumb down on top of the stitching, so when I'm tearing, I'm not pulling at my stitching as much. The areas that there's more stitches that I did a better job at stitching, it's going to come loose easier on those. But I'm just putting my thumb down to hold it. Okay, I got that. So now all of the stabilizer is gone, and you can just wash it, and the rest of that will come loose for you. Alrighty, so let me show you the finished thing here. I'll just kind of lay it out and show you the design. Oh, there we go. So that's a nice little tea towel. I guess I could fold it up to show you guys. This is a really long tea towel. Well, I'm not doing a good job of folding it. Oh well. I just want you to see the gist of it. So that's a nice little fall tea towel with different leaves on it. If you want to add more touches to it, you can. Like you can draw the veins in the leaves if you want to, because this little template I had, it's got them in there. So if you wanted to take like a water-soluble pen like this one and just draw the veins in it, then you can take do the same stitching you did around it, and you can do the veins on the leaves if you want to. That's an added little touch if you get more comfortable with it that you might want to do later on. I think just plain is just fine on this one. So that's this project. I hope you enjoyed watching, and we'll actually give it a try yourself. And like I said, it's just one of those things that you do have to practice with. And that's what your scrap fabric is good for. The ones I always save. I have a whole basket of scrap fabric over there, and that's what that's good for. Whenever you want to practice stuff, use your scrap fabric that came from other projects to help practice with your stitching. Alrighty, I'm going to switch the camera around, and next month, let me get this switch situated so I'm not all tilted. Megan, that did the needle felting First Friday craft for us last month, she's going to do a quilling one for December. So the first Friday in December, she'll be showing you some basics on quilling. And now that's not quilting, it's quilling. It's a paper craft. And just Google that and check it out. This is a really cool craft, and I think it's fairly simple to get a hold of some of the supplies. You might have to maybe order them. I'm not really sure. That's not a craft I do, but she's going to show you some simple design that you can do, like as Christmas ornaments or just decorative things to put on cards, or even little earrings and so forth. So I'm looking forward to that for next month. So if you want to learn about that, then check us out next month on the first Friday to see what she's going to be doing with that. And next week I will be doing a paint along again, and I think I have a picture of it. Let's see. And this will be the Thursday night program I do that's called Crafting with Opal. We're going to do a fall tree, and it's going to be a Q-tip one where you'll paint with paintbrushes the basic parts of it, but the tree is going to be out of Q-tips. And I think that's a pretty cool, and this is off of the Art Sherpa's webpage. So if you want to look at that ahead of time, I think you have to do a search for a fall birch tree Q-tip painting, I think is what it was called. Yeah, I have it written on the front of here. So you can search for that if you want to, and see how to do that. And you can call starting today at the library. Let's see, our number is 501 457-5038. Yeah. And you can call and sign up for some free supplies for that. And then you'll be able to pick them up either Wednesday evening or afternoon, or Thursday morning. It depends on when I get I'll call and let people know when they can come get their supplies when I have them ready for you. But as long as you call by the end of day on next Tuesday to say that you want supplies, then I'll be able to get them ready for you either that Wednesday or that Thursday morning. So be sure to call up there to get supplies, because we give out a canvas, paint brushes, paint, and any other, like the Q-tips for this one, you get some Q-tips too. And if you need chalk, just different little small things like that you might need. The only thing you have to provide is maybe like a paper plate to use to mix your paints on, cups of water, so forth, and paper towels and so forth to clean up, and maybe some newspapers to lay down where you're painting your design and stuff. So call us if you'd like to sign up for that one. And then the week after that, I'll be doing another sewing project for the Crafting with Opal at Thursday at 7. So, all right, well, that's it for today. Bye-bye.